Hi everybody. I'm Shada Crum. I'm a member of the Crazy Wisdom Poetry Circle, and I'm over the moon to be able to introduce you to MB McLatchey and her poetry, though I know a number of her friends are with us tonight and already know her. Some of us do not, so I get to fill in a little bit of that information. MB grew up in a town where the folks around her were shipbuilders, bakers, waitresses, and cashiers. She says hers was an oral tradition with the sounds and voices of elders and neighbors. There were the inflections of Portuguese and Greek and Italian and Irish all around her. So she quickly learned about the music necessary in language and the power, she says, the power of truths told in nods and quick, quiet breaths and the critical importance of timing. So we'll get to hear some of that in her poetry tonight. But first, a little bit more about her. MB holds her graduate degree in comparative literature from Harvard University, a master's in teaching from Brown University, an MFA in writing from Goddard College, and a BA from Williams College. She has over 30 years of teaching. We were talking a little bit about that before the video started. She has over 30 years of teaching, and she's been recognized for her teaching several times, including being awarded the Harvard University's coveted Danforth Prize in Teaching, as well as the Harvard Radcliffe Prize for Literary Scholarship. But let me tell you, that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as awards go. To mention just a few out of the many, many she's received, she's also garnered the Mae Swinson Poetry Award for her debut poetry collection, The Lame God, published by Utah State University Press, the American Poet Prize from the American Poetry Journal, the Robert Frost Award in Poetry, and the Vachel Lindsay Poetry Award. She's had several memorable mentors over her college time, including, this is the part I'm most jealous of, including Richard Wilbur and Seamus Heaney. This is the thing I am just over the moon about. I would love to be able to be mentored by these people. She said she was immensely fortunate to spend countless hours and discussions with Seamus, often over beer, not only on the topic of how to write good poetry, but how to be a good poet. It takes a good person to be a good poet, Seamus often said to her. And she knew that this goodness was what Seamus himself strived for. It was a positioning of himself in service to the world, something that she continues to try to emulate in her work. And I'm sure we'll see some of that also in a new collection that's coming up, poems about teaching, that's going to be called Last Lecture, tentatively called Last Lecture. Currently, the work she does to further the love of poetry and literature in general includes being Florida's Poet Laureate for Volusia County, a professor of classics at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, a chancellor for the Florida State Poets Association, and an arts and wellness ambassador for the Atlantic Center for the Arts. Anyway, now she has agreed to give us some of her time tonight to be with us. So let's welcome MB. Take
Thank you.
it away, MB.
Thank you, Shudder, for that beautiful, thoughtful introduction. And thank you, Crazy Wisdom Poets, for having me, letting me visit your circle again. I enjoyed it so much last month. Thanks, Ed, David, Lissa. It's good to get to know you. Well, I thought I would start with a couple of poems from my forthcoming book. It's still in process, still building poems for it. But I should have mentioned, this is a collection focused on teaching. After 30 years of teaching, it had to be born. And so, are there any teachers here?
Yeah.
Retired? Once a teacher, always a teacher, right? So we have a few here. Okay. And so I thought I'll just read a couple. Should have mentioned I teach, I've been teaching for 30 years, college students, which means most of them are 18, 19 years old, which also means that for about 18 or 19 years, someone else has been preparing their meals or doing their laundry for them. And so I really feel like I'm meeting my students at a significant juncture in their life where they're kind of leaving behind infancy and entering adulthood. Uh, I've written a poem that talks a little bit about this activity of me knowing that I feel like we're doing a lot more here than just examining a subject. And so the whole time we're talking about our Greek literature, we're really talking about so many other things. So this poem is called Full Disclosure. World History, what the course title means. Whisperings in xylography, gambles and losses, like yearnings in braille that you'll be asked to finger, sound out, unveil. No summit, no zenith, no alignment of planets guaranteed, nothing in stone. You are buying a home someone died in. Curie, Copernicus, El Cid. Chronicles, disinterred. The wisdom of the renegade, the rebel kid. Days past in a provost calendar will be proof you endured. Endurance, as in epic songs, longings, self-makings, upendings, finishings like beginnings, underdog odds, the heretic, the face of God. This is a Missouri Review Poem of the Week. It's an abecedarian. Have you tried your hand at abecedarians? This is a poem where an abecedarian is a poem where every word on every verse line, the first word has to align with the alphabet. So A, B, C, D. I started with the letter W, world history, and I went from there and then went back to A, B, C, D. I love to write in forms. It's a wonderful challenge for me. I know many poets think that to write in forms, inherited forms, or to experiment with forms is sort of to put a straitjacket on. It's sort of going to limit your ability to express yourself. I feel exactly the opposite. When I write in forms, I feel like I am actually expanding my horizons. I'm busy answering to the requirements of the form rather than the requirements of my ego or the requirements of the censors that come rushing in when you start writing. Oh, you can't say that, or you can't think this. So writing in forms is for me a beautiful kind of opportunity to really feel liberated to do what I want. There's a wonderful line from Wordsworth. He's writing about the sonnet, and it's a sonnet. And in his sonnet, he says something like, here it goes, that sonnet, no prison was, but a fence for my open yard. So the idea there that I love that idea that the sonnet, from his perspective, is this kind of playground, this playground, but with a fence. And so he feels safe to be able to play. There's a beautiful Buddhist expression, fetter the form and you unfetter the unconscious. I love the idea, therefore, that by introducing some sort of structure, you are now safe to really ignite the imagination, really have some fun. So this was an abecedarian, fun to write. I'll move on. So the next poem is called Grading on a Curve. Teachers, you know what I'm talking about. Grading on a curve has become very popular. Basically what it is in our profession of teaching is inflating the highest grade so that the lowest grade can come up a bit. So nobody's really out of their region. You're still the highest grade, but we have brought up the lowest grades to create a kind of bell curve. I think I'm opposed to this, but I'm not sure. hence the poem. Whereas Yeats says, when I argue with myself, I'm writing poetry. When I argue with others, I'm writing rhetoric. So I had to argue with myself on this one. So this is called Grading on a Curve. Our cat rolls onto its back in freshly cut grass. A blue jay screeches, swoops down, flaps and flaps at his swatting paws. Above them, nestlings squawk. On the ground, an egg, fallen or tossed, unhatched from the nest, inert, and yet no signs of cracks. Hopeful my hand will not ruffle the jay, I lift the egg to its nest, or pray. That's what we call, in the world of poetry, an extended metaphor. So Lawrence Ferlinghetti said that he was glad he learned early in his life as a poet that poetry is best heard through metaphor, not the megaphone. That was important to Ferlinghetti, being the political poet that he is. This last poem I'll read from my in-process collection. You may know about it, particularly the teachers. There's a website called Rate My Professor. Have you heard of it? Rate My Professor. This is a site where students go to review their professors, rate them, mostly cranky students, but some happy, satisfied students as well. So I've taken, extracted for the poem, pretty much verbatim, what some students have said about me on Rate My Professor. But this poem is called Rate My Professor, a Rebuttal. Do not take. She makes you talk, no matter where you sit. I greeted you at the door, another mother's child delivered. You looked away, as if a lamb had been slain. Your early sounds parsed, seeds seeking ground, then whole thoughts crowned. Ridiculous grader. She actually reads your work instead of the deserved A. So hard to put a score on this. Just wrestling with your age. Rubrics hold out such promise, then fold, fade. Instead of systems, a new thought, like a starling transporting a golden bough, was what we praised. I didn't come here to read ancient epics, poems, plays. Remind me again how this gets an engineer employed. Leaving Troy, Odysseus had one thing, Ithaca, in mind. The gods gave him their scales. Slay the proud boy in you and die, a king regaled. A cyclops, sirens, a bard spared among suitors to sing your tale, all of them pleading, set sail, set sail. This was a fun poem to write. This is a dialogue poem. The use of two voices, two perspectives. I love the tension of the two perspectives. This is something I learned by studying Frost more than anyone. Robert Frost is sort of a master in the dialogue. And thank you, Tony, for that beautiful article you sent me today on Robert Frost, that interview that you sent me. Robert Frost, one of his most famous poems called The Burial, in which his wife and the narrator are both grieving the loss of a child, and in a tense dialogue. I feel like Frost when I write a poem in form, and particularly this form, I was in a kind of dance and really following the energy of the students' prompts, the students' comments. And Frost once said he never starts a poem whose ending he knows. I don't know where this is going. And I think that's also a beautiful aspect of writing in a form. You really have no idea where it's going. You know, that comment that so many poets have made, that poetry is not about declaring things, it's about discovering things. And there's so much discovery that comes with, I think, writing in a form. It's just very, very fun. I also have often encouraged my students to, uh, as as religiously as possible, to learn the masters, to follow the masters. Learn, Picasso says, to learn the rules of the masters so you can break them like a pro. And in order to kind of drive that point home with a lot of my students, I show them a picture. I'll show it to you. I'm not sure it will work because I have something virtual here, but I don't know if you can actually see that. Can you see that portrait? Might not work because yeah, I can sort of see. What I was holding up was an early and a later Picasso portrait of his wife. And the early is absolutely strict 19 strict
Kind of realistic.
early 19th century. Can't see it. The later Picasso, pure Picasso. So you at least see the Cubist influence in his later poem. Anyway, learning from the masters so you can break the rules like a pro. At this point, I'll read from some of my most recent book. This book, again, you won't be able to see it, the cover, but it's called Smiling at the Executioner. Smiling at the Executioner. I don't know. Can you see that little peak? Looks like you can see a little bit of a peak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so on the cover, that's Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who was the voice of the philosophy that guides this book. It's called Stoicism. So Stoicism is a philosophy that encourages you to stay on your feet, to be resilient. It admits to us that there will be joys in life, but also hardships, and to face the hardships with grace, with courage. And so I'll read just a couple of poems from this book. I'll read the title poem, which opens with an epitaph from Marcus Aurelius. And the epitaph is, reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself disappears. Smiling at the executioner. Go this way. As if the open barrel were a lotus, its roots anchored in mud, how undeterred by murky water, it submerges and reblooms, petals like a crystal, glazed and without residue. As if you never felt something move, no welcome and prescient egg, no sudden flexing, no cycle taking shape, no memory, no calendar, no yield, because you are the bullet's shield. As if you have nothing to lose, as if all that you have learned to love, the beating heart, the mythic glove of a palm blooming in the womb, the scent that follows touch, is suddenly dust. Just the open grinned, white tooth stare down this time. The staid and steady practice on your knees of mastering someone else's please.
Mm-hmm.
So this is also a poem in form. It's an anaphora. Have you guys tried your hand at that? Anaphora is just a repetition of a phrase, could be a word, at the beginning of several verses, so that the reader begins to feel that he's um, in a kind of dance with you. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Now from there, I'm counting the ways I love you. Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Or once again back in Wordsworth's playground, just having fun and not feeling that I have to say something important, say something ever so wise. So the fun for me of working in any kind of form or just experimenting with a form, I don't have to work with a strict form, is that I feel like the poem is leading me. There's that surrender to the work rather than me directing things to say what it is I want to say. The other poem that I'll share with you from this collection is called, well, I'll give you a little background first. As a young poet, it became clear to me that some poems just have to wait before they can be written. We have to live a few more years. We have to experience a little bit more hardships and triumphs. I was, I think, about 14 years old when my English teacher recited to us Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn, and the suffering was palpable. But I was too young to know really what to do with it. That summer, I read all of Keats's poems and most of his letters. In his last, one of his last letters to his publisher, he said, "I'm dying much more quickly than I expected." To which his publisher replied, "Finish the ode." He did finish the ode, and shortly afterward, he died of tuberculosis at the age of 25. Keats wrote a lot of homages to poets that he loved, so this is my homage to Keats. It's called Ode for an Ode on a Grecian Urn. Ode, let your sorrows go. Let brides be ravished, trees forsake their leaves. Let lovers kiss and fade, daughters age. Let loss be the elixir that induces a new legend, new urn dream. Forests that seed, mature, starve, and reseed without our overtures. Let wanting, waiting, pacing be the rings in carbon dating. A new museum piece. Imagine yearning, bigger than an urn, bigger than God. Desire out of bounds, desire crowned. Paint it fulfilled, the turning back of hounds. What good is song if not the end of one man's wish? What ifs? I died at 25, so many do. Earn, make your story new. Beauty is truth when sung to a priest's staccato voice and tone near a young marine's too heavy, too mature burial stone. When love betrayed makes lovers stutter phrases, sweet cliches that they used to say alone. Put it in stone. Beauty is truth when sung to the beat of a child's quiet feet leaving home. When aging lovers sing to one another, remember when we used to rock in one another's arms and we knew God and the devil's charms?
Mm.
So how are we? 7:43.
Yeah, we have time for a couple more. We got started late.
Well, we have other poets who want to read. Yes. So uh, I'll read one more. How's that? And
Okay.
then I was going to read from another book, but I've decided not to since it would be the last poem. Um, well, let me think about this now. One and a small one. Yeah,
Yeah, there is
let's
a
do that.
requirement for a
Yeah,
two-poem warning.
yeah. 2 point warning. Yeah, okay. Uh, I'll read one from my book called The Lame God. Should have referred to this. Um, this is a book that was inspired actually by a tragedy. What happened was a woman I knew of but didn't know personally in Boston. Her 17-year-old was abducted and murdered, And this became a very well-known case in Boston. Her name was Molly Bish. I don't know if any of you ever heard about this national case. Uh, as a mother of two boys, I heard about the story and I just couldn't let it go. And so one poem led to another. Paul Valéry, the French poet, says, we don't choose to write, the poem chooses us. And this is exactly what happened with this collection of poems. So this is a poem I'll share with you. The series of poems basically gives a voice to the mother of the abducted child. And so the first poem that opens the book is called 1-800-THE-LOST. And that is the phone number you call when you are looking for a child. This poem opens with an epitaph from the FBI and the National Crime Information Center. It says, acting quickly is critical. 74% of abducted children who are ultimately murdered are dead within 3 hours of the abduction. 1-800-THE-LOST. The weight of the receiver in my hand, the down bird in my palm first lifting you, the counselor's words rehearsed, a burlesque bland, the shift in time, the shift to looking through her lens. Today, you are just one of 200 lost. My eyes fix on our bright fence. I say your name, but you are no one new, caught in an ancient book that she'll condense. I want her to discuss you in the present tense. I want the gods to stop pretending love calls the departed home. We called you with our various loves, had hope, hovered over still fields, made wind like the gods do before they come unhinged. Let their rage loose on an unresponsive yield, fields gone deaf and dumb, unshaken, fruitless ground, unmoved by a neighborhood of mothers who left their own to find you. Tables like mine, set. I want the gods to swallow their prayers whole. Choke up my child like the Olympians, a girl unbruised by her journey down their throats. I want her at my table, fruit, alms, that the gods I see can give or take. Balm for the irritations I caused or they caused. Gifts between us or perhaps among themselves. A girl that they're willing to barter away. I'm here and I'm willing to talk or trade.
Mm.
So I can't end on that note. So I'll go back to just a lighter poem and then off to you other poets. How's that?
Sounds good.
All right. Alrighty. This is a poem. Another kind of fun experiment to do as a poet where you sort of superimpose your modern world on the ancient. And so this is a poem called The Wisdom of the Cave, which is referring to Plato's allegory of the cave. Are you familiar with it? And so in Plato's allegory of the cave, he says, we can live our lives one way or the other. We can live inside a cave where our lives are limited, contained, predictable, or we can live outside the cave where there's adventure, excitement, new knowledge. So this is called The Wisdom of the Cave, comparing the cave to Facebook. It opens with an epitaph from Mark Zuckerberg. He says, if you're always under the pressure of real identity, I think that is somewhat of a burden. In the cave, our histories are shadows on a wall. Our memories wrote lessons that flicker and mutate, fall and spring, then and now, captured and interchanged. Friezes like postcards sculpted to ornament the grotto, endure, resist decay. When the shadows dance, we point, open our mouths, as if for a split second, something shifts, recalibrates. A glimpse of fire and lathe and shadow makers, forms beyond hope, ideas like sirens singing, cracks in a wall that illuminate, hint at another source. Rivers, flora, and bursts of color, starlings with iridescent wings, shrubs whose roots finger through mud for something to drink. A world too fluid to dangle from rod and string. How could we want its range's moon, its chorus marking dawn, its feathered swirl confusing predators, its messenger's glad song? Why should we mind the tether anchoring us, the flame that fixes seasons, stages night and day, that orients us frontward, ever frontward, and keeps the constellations in their place?
Mm. Thank you, MB. That was just delightful.